Good morning, this is Peg Larson and John Call talking to you from Dunn Brothers Coffee Shop. This week it has been a very tumultuous week for education. Normally there is a first deadline and a second deadline for policy. The first deadline means that you have to get a bill out of one body, the House, or the other, the Senate. And then you have the next week to get it out of the other body before your bill is technically dead, even though nothing, as we know, ever really dies at the legislature. However, this week, Representative Mariani, the chair of Education Policy, and Senator Torres Ray, the chair of Education Policy in the Senate, has decided to put together their omnibus bills a week early. And what happened with Chair Mariani's bill is he introduced House File 1151, which is the governor's bill, and then he did a DE3 amendment to it, which put in language that his committee and himself wanted and included a lot of the commissioner's language also. A couple of the things that we would find of interest is the Gifted and Talented program. What they put in there is that you would allow children who were below the minimum age for entering school, if they tested out to be gifted or talented, and to make sure that you had appropriate education tools to make sure you could meet their needs. I know that there will be funding that goes along with that. It's in the formula, but I have a feeling that there might be some additional funding somewhere down the way. The other thing that they did, they actually did the English language learner, and they took that from 5 years to 7 years. So we're waiting to see how much money will come with that, if any. They haven't discussed funds at this point in time. The other thing they did was the Early Start program, and I'm actually going to read that to you so I have it correct. A district may commence an elementary or secondary school year before Labor Day, except as provided under paragraph B. It shall not hold a school day on the Thursday or Friday immediately preceding Labor Day. There's quite a bit of language in here to close the achievement gap. It was one of their top goals this year, and they have the achievement and integration for Minnesota, and it goes on for, they have a plan component, they have achievement and integration revenue, they have achievement and integration levy, achievement and integration aid, incentive revenue, and revenue reserved, revenue uses. And that's one of the things that is unusual this year in a policy bill, to actually have blank spaces for revenue. Normally they wait until they go to the finance committee to do that. So there's quite a bit of language concerning that. Another thing that I think we would be interested in, let me get this here. Well, that would also be with the Achievement Integration Aid, and they have it starting in 2014 and continuing in 2015. So it appears that in the House bill you would be able to levy in 2014. I know there was a separate bill in the Senate that was authored to continue the integration aid levy so that there would not be a gap, and I know that we're doing a strong push for that. In the Senate bill, it's very interesting because the Senate bill, obviously as normal, is totally different than the House bill. In the Senate bill, one of the main pieces of the bill is Senator Uyghur's bill that says that you could not drop out of school till the age 18, and that actually carries a great cost with it to the school districts, and there was no money provided. So that was actually removed from the Senate bill in the committee, and then it was put back in the next day for the age of 17, which is his compromise. We'll see how that fares in conference committee, as that also still has a cost to it. The other bill that was, I'm gonna have to wait here a second. I can't see to read.
I can stop it. So
Okay. The other bill that was in here is Senator Dahl's bill on different methods of measuring achievement, and that's quite a bit of this bill too. She actually deleted the early childhood part of the bill, saying that it had not made deadline, but it is in the House bill, so we'll see how that goes. In these coming weeks, in this coming week, we will hear the bills that did not make it in one body or the other, and then there should be a final omnibus bill put together. That bill will be referred to Education Finance. Actually, this bill, both of these have been referred to Education Finance. And a couple bills dealing with equity and early learners were sent to the Judiciary Committee in the Senate and were heard yesterday, and all of these bills will accumulate together to make the final, I think it will be an education policy finance omnibus bill. Other than that, things are moving along at the Capitol. They're going to take a 10-day break from the midnight on the 22nd until noon on the 2nd of April. They had hoped to have more omnibus bills done so that they could take that time to look over them. But they're spending an awful lot of time on health care and the health care impact, and that has to be done before April 1st, or else we would have to take the federal standards. So there's a lot of things happening at the Capitol. If you want to come up and visit and run around, we'd be happy to see you. Thank you. Now to John.
Hi, John Call here. I'm going to be brief today because I had an opportunity to interview Senator Carla Nelson. And I'm going to let her talk in more detail about what's going on in the Senate. But I did want to discuss very briefly what is in the supplemental bill that has a bearing on K-12 education. The supplemental bill and the announcement of a change in course on taxes constitutes a significant mid-course correction for the governor. Tax reform is pretty much out the window. The governor has dropped his the sales tax proposal as it applies to business taxes, to services, as well as to clothing. Less money coming in the door means less expenditure, so the governor's had to cut back on some of the things he wanted to spend money on as well. That was mostly the property tax rebate, however. So with his supplemental budget, he's managed to come up with an additional $9 million for E12 education, which is going to go into early childhood and all-day kindergarten. He's come up with an additional $13 million for post-secondary education, which will go into financial aid. And the biggest adjustment in his supplemental budget is an additional $22 million for debt service. That is, I guess, what is consistent with his desire to have a approximately $750 million bonding bill. The taxes that he's going to stay with are an increase in the upper income bracket over $250,000 for a married couple, and he's going forward with a 94-cent a pack cigarette tax. That's enough from me for this week. I'd at this point like to yield to Senator Carla Nelson.
We just left the Education Policy Committee. I'm the lead on that committee. And we were looking at the Education Policy Omnibus Bill. So a great time to be visiting with you about that. In general, you know, the state government is always focused on education. It's 40% of our state budget, and we know that our future depends on how well educated our students are. So there's always a good deal of focus at the Capitol on education. Some of the things, particularly this year, that we're working on is really better aligning our K-12 system and our higher education system. Right now, about 70% of our children who graduate are not ready for college. And at the same time, we know that in just 5 short years, 70% of jobs will require some post-secondary education. So we're working closely with our K-12 systems and our higher education systems to better align that and kind of remove some of those silos. And I think you'll be seeing some legislation about that as well. And then at the other end of the spectrum as well, we realize very clearly, and I particularly as a former teacher see the importance of making sure that children are ready for kindergarten, ready to learn when they start kindergarten. So we're looking at some early childhood things as well. One of those is all-day kindergarten. Certainly right now about 50% of the students in Minnesota do have all-day kindergarten options already. There is legislation that would make that a voluntary option for all school districts, and I want to really applaud you, the Rochester School District, for pushing forward with this. and not waiting upon the state. So I think it's important to do what you can within your own power, and I certainly applaud that. We're going to continue to look at how best to make that happen for all of our students. And then, of course, we have, before kindergarten, we have that importance of early childhood education. And there are many proposals before the legislature to look at high-quality early childhood education. Last year I was a sponsor of the MELF bill, Minnesota Early Learning Foundation bill. This year that's moving a step further, actually, in using the parent-aware system so that parents have some way to rate quality or to see quality in their daycare settings. That's something that's working through the legislature. There's another piece that I've been working on, which is the child care assistance programs that we have in the state. We spend $400 million a biennium on those child care assistance programs, and I'd like to see those somehow tied to quality. We're talking about the same children, the 3 and 4-year-olds. Let's make sure that the child care assistance programs also are tied to quality so that we have children who are ready to learn. Some issues important specifically to you. I heard the superintendents in every one of my districts talk about the importance of a flexible learning year. So I've offered 2 bills. One is which is to allow schools to start before Labor Day. Kind of the irony is I offered that bill. It was called my maiden bill when I was in the House of Representatives 10 years ago. And lo and behold, here we're back. I'm in the Senate 10 years later, and guess what? You still can't start before Labor Day. I have a bill that would allow early starts. And then I have a broader bill, which is the flexible learning year, which would allow school districts, with the approval of their voters, to really operate their school year like they, according to state law, of course, but giving them flexibility in maybe it would be 45-15, maybe it would be starting before Labor Day. So I think that's just an important element of local control. We almost got that put on the Education Omnibus bill today, but it was voted down. So I didn't have real good news on that aspect of that. On the other hand, I have legislation for better aligning our career and technology, career and technical education. That bill did get adopted today. That amendment was put on the policy bill. And again, that's better aligning our K-12 system, our higher ed system, with the jobs that are available. So working with the workforce so that we can make sure that our students are being trained and prepared for the jobs that will be available for them in those sectors. I think there will be some increase in the per pupil funding. Last year, over the biennium, there was a $150 per pupil increase. I do believe there will be more. At this point, I'm not sure how much. But I can say that most legislators, I think, have heeded the advice of their school boards and their members and their constituents, which is they really like the flexibility of having that money on the per pupil general formula where you have the more control in how to use those funds. Sometimes the legislature goes more towards a categorical funding and adding different streams of funding, and you know, I know each one of those has a constituency and they're all well intended, but as far as local control goes, it's much better if we put the money on the formula and then allow the local school boards more discretion in how to use that. So there will be more money, I think, on the per pupil formula, just not sure at this point exactly how much. So those are some of the things we're working on. There's lots more to do, and I look forward to hearing from you so that I can better represent you. Thank you.